The crux of the issue is reading is not natural. The brain has to rewire itself when we start to encounter printed, written language and phonemic languages. As an infant, we start to internalize the auditory part of our language. We hear people talk. It's instinctive for us to pick up a baby and get close to him and talk to him, and we do those little voices. We're actually teaching at that point in time. That infant is soaking that stuff up. But then when we meet an orthographic alphabet or a language where we have to learn to read and write that's coded, that part's not natural for us. 80% of the population is very, very good at learning that code. So good that they don't really even realize they've learned it. There's another 20% of the population that doesn't internalize the code naturally. It's a code that they can't break. And so dyslexia it's a neurobiological difference. It's brain that processes information differently. And that brain doesn't utilize the area where the rest of the population quickly, easily, automatically processes language.
True Potential Education, located in West Des Moines, is dedicated to educating students with dyslexia. Dyslexia is an often misunderstood learning disability that can affect a person's reading and writing skills. For True Potential's founders, Dawn Wilson and Nina Lorimor-Easley, dyslexia is a deeply personal issue.
It started early. I always knew that I was different and I never felt smart when I was going through school, and I always had to work extremely hard to do well in school. It wasn't until I went to college and became a speech language pathologist and specialized in dyslexia that I realized, oh my gosh, I believe that I have dyslexia myself. One of the things that came to light early is struggling to learn to tell time on a clock with hands, and also I had a really hard time learning my mouth facts. And I remember that my teacher in first grade made me wear this necklace with spools on it. And every time I had to calculate something, I had to move the spools. And I was the only one in my class. It was either first or second grade, I can't remember. But regardless, I hated wearing that necklace. And even though I know what she was doing now, she was trying to make learning multisensory for me and visual and use all the senses to learn. I wasn't very appreciative at the time because it was embarrassing to me. So, you have scars from early on just for being singled out for different things.
When my oldest son started to school, he was clearly struggling. He was struggling with reading, he was struggling with writing, and my kids go to a small school district here in Iowa. The educators were my friends, they were my peers, everybody was trying, and nobody could figure out why he was struggling so bad. And so we kind of go to the all-inclusive, maybe it's a maturity issue, they'll grow out of it, and waiting to see if reading would come along, and it just never did. And the whole time we were waiting, he was getting more and more frustrated. We ended up in Iowa City getting him diagnosed, and when we were at Iowa City for the diagnosis, they told me there that 1 in 5 kids have dyslexia. So I came back to the school, I had diagnosis in hand, and I was like, yay, we found the answer, guys, he has dyslexia. And the school said, we've never had any kids with dyslexia. We don't know what to do for dyslexia. So immediately, I'm not a mathematician, but I'm thinking they had some kids with dyslexia and just didn't know it. And so that really struck me. And the school was helpful, but I was leading the charge. They were following me. I spent my nights on Google. I spent my nights researching, and I went back to them and said, here, let's try this. Here, let's try this. Whereas when I first got that diagnosis, I thought it was going to be the other way around.
Prior to joining together for True Potential, Nina and Dawn were separately working to educate students with dyslexia. They met in 2014 by networking with other dyslexia advocates.
Private practice is great some months and, not so great other months. And I downsized my practice to 25% and went to work for the public schools. I respect public schools very much, but they really weren't ready to hear much about dyslexia at that time. And it frustrated me because I knew how to help these kids, but I had to use their curriculum. I had to do it within their time frames. I couldn't do dyslexia therapy in 15 minutes. And then the paperwork to record what I did in that 15 minutes took 30 minutes. And I could not do what I do here.
I started learning to teach dyslexic kiddos, and I was working out of my house, tutoring kids in the evenings, and I was just becoming overwhelmed. As we were starting to network and find other people who had this dyslexia mess in common, that's where Dawn and I met.
A couple other people in the area contacted me and said, okay, we need to start a Decoding Dyslexia chapter in Iowa.
Decoding Dyslexia is a grassroots organization that spreads awareness for dyslexia and advocates for policy changes in public education. An early goal for Decoding Dyslexia Iowa was to legally define dyslexia in the state education code to allow teachers to openly discuss dyslexia in the school system.
In the early 90s, special ed was becoming very inclusive. Iowa made the decision systemically that we weren't going to identify specific learning problems within the class because we didn't want any student to be eliminated from learning. So, to put that kind of bluntly, we didn't ever want a teacher to have an excuse. We didn't want a teacher to be able to say, well, I'm not qualified to teach a student with dyslexia. I'm not qualified to teach a student with autism, whatever it is. And so we just put everybody in the classroom and we decided not to categorize anyone so that everyone would have an equal learning opportunity. Now, looking at that in hindsight, what that did to us systemically is we removed all of the tools and resources that we truly had to find out why a child was struggling. In order to diagnose it, you have to look at it from a language standpoint. Logic would tell you that that would be happening in the schools. Getting the bill passed in the state of Iowa was huge, and at least getting the word dyslexia into the code allowed teachers to be able to at least discuss this possibility, whereas prior to that it was just completely taboo. And even when we went into legislators and we would tell them, teachers aren't allowed to talk about dyslexia in schools, and the legislators didn't believe us. And we would walk away and they would go research, and then they would say, come back, come back and talk to us. And so moving that roadblock was the beginning of the conversation.
Through their work together with Decoding Dyslexia, Dawn and Nina decided that they wanted to continue serving people with dyslexia in a more immediate way. In 2014, they both began to entertain the idea of starting a business.
And so in 2014, we decided to open True Potential Education.
The first meeting was at a bar over a beer. I'm thinking, oh man, I could lose everything. Single mom, it was scary.
Took the plunge. I actually still have the texts that we're going back and forth like, okay, we got to do this because I'm about to give my notice at my job. There's no backing out now. We have to go forward.
I literally sent it at 11:59, my resignation.
So in 2014, I left my job as a meeting planner and started True Potential Education as well.
It was scary. It was a very scary thing to do.
And we wanted to get the business up and going while the conversation was still going on. So it was a relatively quick and terrifying decision. But, it's panned out well, and we were right. There was a huge need.
By performing diagnostic assessments, remediating dyslexia, and hosting classes for parents and educators, True Potential embraces its mission to change the lives of people with dyslexia.
We want to help those kids who are not reaching their true potential and assess why, and then close that gap so they can go on with life and do what they're supposed to do. We want them to feel good about themselves.
For me, my own philosophy, if you're doing the right things for the right reasons, then things are going to work out.
We basically just took what I was already doing in my private practice and put it into a larger model and said, okay, let's go find a place with 3 small therapy rooms and let's go.
We moved into our first little office. When we moved in there, we thought that would last us maybe a year or two. It lasted us about 6 months. So we moved to a bigger space thinking that that would last us for a year or two. And actually in about 3 months, we had to secure additional space. So we didn't move, but we kind of had 2 locations going. And then a year later, we moved to our current space, which is big enough for us to grow into. But it has been a challenge keeping tabs on a business that's growing that fast.
With such a quickly growing business, Dawn and Nina had to recruit the workforce to answer the demand.
We know that the largest part of our expense is going to be our staff, our teachers, and they are our lifeblood by far. We have wonderful educators. Managing that piece of it is really my biggest priority, making sure that TPE is a good place to work, that they want to come back here every day, because without our educators, we are in big trouble.
The business is expensive, and we have to charge a certain amount to make it. If you overcharge, you won't have people come to you. Sometimes it's hard because people think it should be a free service, because learning to read should be a free service.
It's difficult to have to charge families, but Dawn has 20 years of experience and a master's degree and Wilson certification, which is the equivalent in cost and time to a master's degree. All of our staff here has been trained for months and months and months, and we spend excessive amounts of time making sure that what we do stands apart. If people do have to pay us for this service, then we are absolutely going to be sure that we make a difference for that child, for that family, for that student, that we change their life.
Even though True Potential is a successful and growing company, Nina and Dawn still have to sacrifice every day in order to stay in business.
There's no way I could have done this without her. And I think it's the same for her. I don't think she could have probably done it without me being able to teach the kiddos. But so it's a good partnership in that I couldn't have grown up more than just a small practice.
It's taken a lot out of Dawn and I, and God bless our kids who have made their own meals for 3 years because mom's not there. One of the things I underestimated the most was the schedule. We ramp up every day at about 3 p.m. is when things really get going here. So when everybody else is headed home to take care of their families, I can't take calls from mine anymore because I'm busy and there's stuff going on. And in a business like this, you can't just walk away because you're busy or I don't feel good, so we're going to cancel a session. We do everything in our power to maintain every session that's scheduled on our end. And there have been times for each of us where, we wondered, should we have done this? I'm overwhelmed. I'm tired. Up to here. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, it's worth it.
I'm not sure if I wasn't so passionate about what I do, that I would still be in it, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. I think that you have to love what you do in order to just take off and do something crazy like this.
We want True Potential to be what we didn't have. Dawn didn't have resources when she was going through school, and I didn't have resources when I was trying to help my boys. And when you're working with a kiddo and they read for the first time, that's worth everything in the world.
Maybe even lean. We're gonna bring that foot out just a little bit further. There. All right. Cool. And fist with your hands. I'm Ben Shirk, and I own Shirk Photography. Chin just a little bit this way. We have become known for creating very unique pieces of artwork of people with activities, senior athletes, wrestler, baseball player, but not just seniors, anybody who has a passion for something.
Shirk Photography is a photography studio that serves clients from across the country. Their work has been featured in professional photography magazines as well as on national television outlets such as CBS News, The Today Show, and ESPN. Even with all this success, they remain in the small Iowa town of Wilton. With a population of just under 3,000, Wilton might not seem like the typical home for such a nationally recognized photography studio. Entrepreneurs Ben and Sara Shirk started their business in Wilton because it was their hometown. After high school, Ben and Sara both attended the University of Iowa, where Ben also competed for the Iowa Hawkeye wrestling team. Sara studied accounting while Ben struggled to narrow his studies.
Going through college, I loved everything I did, though. I loved anthropology. I have a geology minor. I loved environmental science, architecture, art, creative writing. Everything I took, I loved it. So I finally had to. The staff there finally made me decide, because after you can only go to school so many years and wrestle, so they told me how to pick one of them, and end up with an art and then a geology minor.
After college, Ben was hired by a local newspaper as a graphic artist.
We got married and came back home. I had one more year left of college to finish up, and he decided to get a job at the Journal. So he was working there. So starting off was more difficult for us off of not too much income coming in just from him and me still being in school and paying for that. So that was quite interesting. So we had to learn a lot about budgeting and starting off in married life.
Soon, Ben and Sara had their first child. It was then that Ben discovered his passion for photography.
After my first son was born, I really wanted to start taking portraits of him and taking pictures and things like that. I had lots of nieces and nephews, and I started taking pictures of them, and gradually figured out that I love just capturing something of them, but it's even more interesting to me to kind of create a story around them and turn it into something other than what you can just simply get out of a camera. I was just going to do it as kind of a hobby, and she thought I was kind of crazy because we were also building a house at that time, and we have a lot of new things going on in our lives. We just gotten married, and she was a little bit frustrated that I was starting a brand new hobby and spending all this time on like a website, developing a website and researching camera gear and all this stuff when we had all these other things going.
It started off with our family friends, and that I still thought was probably a hobby. And then he started photographing others that were no longer friends, people we didn't know, and it kept getting busier and busier. And I was working outside the home also in my accounting job, and it started to get really busy to where it was hard to balance everything. And at that point I knew it was becoming a business, no longer a hobby. So after our second son, Mason, was born, he decided to dive full-time into photography and walk away from his job at the Journal.
She obviously, being the business-oriented one, I realized that we couldn't continue both my part-time photography business and working at the Journal, and how busy we were getting. And she was having to help me out, kind of figuring out taxes and income and the invoices and all that kind of stuff. And she realized that we couldn't continue doing both of those, and so something needed to be given up.
With the photo business taking off, Ben quit his job at the Journal and pursued photography full-time.
That was a scary thing to do, to kind of jump full-time, but I knew I still had my job, so we kind of took baby steps to get to where we are. And then when he started competing in his photography competitions, there was like, his eyes lit up. He was so excited to compete again because he wrestled all through college, and to see that passion come back, I'm like, it was kind of nice to see him be all excited about that. So then I knew it was a passion that would stick around for a long time.
Just like his wrestling career, Ben wanted to perform at the highest level. He began frequently attending photography seminars and competitions. Even though the quality of his photos were improving, he still needed help running the business.
We started going to our very first educational event down in Florida. We decided to go for a getaway. It was life-changing. We met a lot of our mentors that are current mentors in photography that showed us that you can make a photography career, be very profitable as long as you think of it as a business, not just a hobby. So we made lots of changes after coming home from that event.
By implementing their new business model, Shirk Photography increased profits. Sara left her accounting job to help run the business, and Ben continued competing and attending conventions.
I was assisting, just helping assist at different conventions, And I wasn't being called back for one of them, and I was like, why? I kept pestering him, like, why aren't you calling me back? Why can't I come help again? Like, I want to come, assist at these things and learn. And they're like, well, we don't want you there to help us assist anymore. Like, what did I do? They're like, no, we actually want you to come speak this time. And it was like, what? Like, quit joking around. It was realizing that people actually wanted to know the skills that I had learned and some of the things I had achieved was definitely a big moment for us.
Today, Ben speaks at conventions and even hosts students at his studio.
I have a lot of students that come in and that are interested in pursuing a career in photography, but you can be a really bad photographer and still make a great career at it if you have the right business sense. Or you can be an amazing photographer and completely fail at it and not have any business because you don't have the right business set up. So business is almost more important than the photography aspect if someone's just starting out into that. But going to conferences and educating yourself is a big thing, and not just kind of relying on a stuff you see online, because the stuff you see online doesn't necessarily, if you're on a forum or whatever, there's other newbies coaching other newbies, and it doesn't really result in the level of expertise that you should be getting. Go to a hands-on workshop, learn at a convention where there's certainly people, established professionals that can teach you the rights and wrongs of what needs to go on, and kind of help set you off in the right direction. Because if you're just learning from someone else that's just new or even just even okay, it's not going to set you off maybe on the right path that you need to go down.
The Shirk Photography Studio is now located on Main Street in Wilton, employing both Ben and Sara as well as a graphic designer. Even though Ben and Sara have seen national success, they don't have any plans of moving their business out of Wilton.
A lot of people ask me that, from photographers to clients to just friends, like, when are you leaving? How long are you staying here? This is where I grew up, and all my friends and family are here, and it's certainly a great place to run a business, being in a small town in Iowa, and it's great to be in a community like that.
It's where my heart is, my home. My family. I would never leave my mom and dad and my sisters. They all, and his mom and dad. And my parents are 7 miles south of town. His are 4 miles north of town. My 3 sisters live in town. So we're always together as a family. And family means, I guess that would my definition of success is being able to enjoy them in our relationships in life. So if you took me away from them, I could experience more business and financial success, but there'd be a big hole in my heart and I'd never truly be happy. So Wilton is where we'll be.